Good afternoon. Welcome back, everybody, to our afternoon meeting. First up on the agenda, Director Dave Hayes, Emergency Services. Whoops. Yeah, I did that right. Good? Yes. Revised bylaws.
Good afternoon and hello again. David Hayes, Director of Emergency Services. I'm here today to offer a position of the Emergency Services Advisory Council with a request to consider amendment of its bylaws. Those bylaw amendments are most specific to the meeting formats and then the membership structures and their terms. So report in brief, the purpose of the ESAC is to advise the Board of County Commissioners, the Board, and County staff on recommendations regarding the provision of emergency services in Washington County. When requested, the ESAC may also serve in an advisory capacity to the municipalities of Washington County, the County Fire and Rescue Association, WCVFRA, and any volunteer or career fire or emergency medical services company authorized to operate in Washington County. The ESAC is to be comprised of 9 individual voting members, and they are as follows. 5 members that are selected by the board, each commissioner having 1 appointment, and 1 member selected by the City of Hagerstown Mayor and Council, and 3 members selected by the WCVFRA. The Director of Emergency Services and the President of the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association will each serve as ex officio members. Each member shall have staggered terms such that 1 member is replaced each year for both the 3-year members of the WCVFRA and the 6 commissioner and city members. The county commissioners may appoint others to serve as non-voting ex officio members of the committee for various terms of office and for varying purposes. Member terms shall be for 3 years, with the initial terms being staggered. No member shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms unless waiver is given by the board. The discussion, the bylaws were reviewed by the ESAC board, and it was agreed that each commissioner shall have an appointment to the ESAC. Additionally, language was added so that a member may serve more than 2 consecutive terms should an exception be made by the board. In the previously approved bylaws, it reads that no member may serve more than 2 consecutive terms unless a year of absence from the board is achieved by that particular member. Additionally, language was added regarding stating that the ESAC shall conduct work sessions every other month, beginning in February of each year. There's no fiscal impact. Concurrences are the county attorney, county clerk, director of emergency services. You have an alternative to not revise the bylaws, and then the proposed bylaws for the ESAC with revisions are included, and also the existing bylaws. And going back to the changes specific, they sit in Article 5, Sections 1 and 4, and in Article 6, Sections 1, 2, and 3, and they're as stated in the ARF.
Previously, could the board have made an exception to that 2-term previously?
The way the bylaws are written, if you apply them directly, and the county attorney may want to weigh in on this, I would say no, that wasn't an option. That's one of the proposals here. And right. The rationale behind the request from the ESAC itself is historically some of the citizens at large have had poor attendance, and we're coming up on the expiration of our most active citizen at large, Mr. Lunsford. In his entire 6-year term, he's missed 1 meeting. So we feel that he's engaged, he's informed, and with where we are and some of the topics in fire and emergency services, it's worthy of keeping him on board, and that was unanimous across the board.
Right.
They're not listed on as concurrent CSAC, but they're in support of this.
They are.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Mr. Lunsford, with all the things that are going on, someone to come in new would be totally lost.
It would take some time. And that's historically what we've seen with the citizens that have come on board. And that's not against anything of their ability to learn the system. It just takes time to get them up to speed because the system is so dynamic, and even more so now.
Didn't we have a discussion about the meeting? I know it's here, but explain that a little bit. Wasn't the voting members going to have a meeting separate from the rest of the board? Didn't we discuss that at the ESAC meeting?
We did. They had that 2 meetings ago now. It would have been a special meeting called by the chair, and by invite, the president of the association and myself were also invited to that meeting.
Yeah, I think from the ones I've attended, there's a whole gallery of people who really aren't on the committee.
That's correct.
I think the committee itself wants to talk separate.
In that meeting, actually, Commissioner brought forth the recommendation here that every other meeting be more structured like a work session rather than a specific agenda-driven session. The committee felt it had gotten more progress done in that work session style environment than it had in the agendas where we're just reading through reports and conducting relatively small sections of business.
Jeff, what meeting, Dave, what meeting would the commissioner be more apt to be at? Both?
You could be at any one of the two.
Right.
It's not going to be a closed meeting, but the regular meeting would be every other month, and that would be
Gotcha.
January, March, and so on out.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah,
certainly
I think
that
what they're
meeting.
saying, there's a lot of people attending the meetings who are on the committee.
Right.
The committee itself wants to make sure they have a committee meeting of itself,
Mm-hmm.
but always open to those people at that other
That's correct.
meeting, correct? Okay.
One of the biggest changes that I noticed, and I assume that that was part of the bylaws, each commissioner has one appointment. I thought we were doing that. Was that just in practice and not necessarily according
That's
to the policy?
exactly right. The previous bylaws did not indicate that particular process, but that, to my knowledge, for an extended period of time has been the way we selected that. And actually, all 6 representatives from the commissioners, 5 would be selected, and then jointly, you would ask me normally to recommend somebody, and then you would give concurrence to that. That 6th position now is recommended to allow the mayor and council to select somebody that they feel could represent the city's interests, and not necessarily somebody from the mayor and council. They're not allowed to be on the board according to the bylaws.
Well, there's been a council,
If we go
city
back
council
in
there.
history, when we established this committee, that was the consent of all the commissioners to move forward with all of us to have one pick. So evidently then it didn't get a transition into their bylaws. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it's just the bylaws didn't spell that. This just basically comes in and spells out that process to make sure that there's clear understanding, from this point forward. And I believe that would be a correct representation of the language we tried to get into this.
One question I have with this, that individuals that I've talked to, I don't know if it's the Active Chiefs Committee or whatever, they, I guess, would like a spot on this. And I don't know, I guess, how to go about that or whatever, because I understand that they'd be members of the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association, but then there's another group of just the Active Chiefs. Is that something we could be looking at, that the Active Chiefs would be able to put a person on this board?
I think anything that the commissioner body should so choose can be included. It's your committee, so the structure certainly can be modified and amended by that. In part, I guess some of that representation is intended to come from the 3 representatives that the Volunteer Association would select, or it could come from the 5 positions that any one of the commissioners select. But if you want to have discussion about that, we can certainly table this for a period of time and let us get back to an ESAC meeting and have that discussion, have that at county staff levels, and make sure that the balance is still maintained for the intent of what the committee's charged with.
In other words, we can take comments here if you like, or if you'd like to proceed. It's certainly
how-
at your discretion.
On this current board, how many of the Active Chiefs are currently on this as a voting member?
None of the active chiefs. There are 3 retired battalion chiefs from the Hagerstown Fire Department that are represented on the board.
And I think that's what their concern is.
And do we know how many commissioner appointees are on there right now? And is there 5 on there now, commissioner appointees?
We'd be down one with one resignation of recent that would need to be reappointed. And we wanted to get through the bylaws first, and then
Gotcha.
I think that's coming to you for
Understand.
for recommendation. And then we're actually going to be down 2, just to further clarify, with the resignation of Ole Griffith, who was recently hired by the division, and we took the position that he would not be able to serve on that board.
Gentlemen, we can approve the bylaws today and address your other concerns at a later time through the ESAC committee. How's that?
Well, that would be
good.
Probably want to do it all at one time.
Yeah, that'd be a change of the bylaws again, so it'd be.
No, it's not that painful. I mean, but you don't want to make a decision today. In fact, ESAC weighing in on how many chiefs you're changing the structure of the committee, so that committee should have its input, not based on what we're saying.
I would like to take that approach. Since this has been approved by our ESAC committee, I would be comfortable with agreeing to these changes today and then have that come back in a set timeline, get their input for that change, because that's new to me as well. But And I would put a date certain on
and
that can come back to us by.
When's your next meeting?
It'd be the first week in April, so next week, actually.
But couldn't one of the commissioners, there's two coming up, appoint a chief?
We easily could, but the problem is right now, I mean, we could have done that, but we don't have any of the current chiefs on it right now. And if you're making this change, then you're saying there's always going to be a active current chief on there.
So a couple options you could take. You could approve what we've got here now and then consider expanding the number on the board and put one of the requirements that one representative will be an active chief that submits their application through the appropriate channels, and then we bring a recommendation here. So there's a couple ways to tackle this, I think, that we could go forward with the changes here and then still come back. It would just mean we'd have to open the membership up just a small amount.
What if sometimes when you get too big of a group, you can't get much of a conversation accomplished, but the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association, maybe we can also see if they're amenable to one of their 3 positions, be a chief, be on that chief's committee. That way we can keep the size the same but still fulfill.
Yeah, and it's an odd number anyway, but we want an odd number, right?
Oh, I'm definitely comfortable with that. If we can put in the bylaws that of the Washington County Volunteer Fire Rescue Association, one of their 3 members needs to be an active chief.
I'd like their feelings on that, but
I'd like for it to go back in front of the ESAC committee and get their thoughts.
Yeah, I think we're okay to take this back. What I would ask you is to informally agree that we would extend the term of Dwayne Lunsford until such time the bylaws are modified and changed. And Kirk, I don't know if that's something you have to weigh in on or not, but that's our only stipulation. His term technically expires March 31.
We really need him right now, right, Mr. Lunsford?
We do.
Continue to serve.
Yeah.
He continues to serve.
So we're good then? Yeah,
Yeah, if we don't appoint, he continues to serve.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, what do you need from us? You got everything?
I think we're good. We'll have some conversations offline and make sure that we have the conversations with the ESAC and the association.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mr. Lunsford continues to serve, so we don't have to say a thing, correct?
I'm worried about the bylaws.
Well, the bylaws are
Bring
pending.
the bylaws back for formal approval in 2
Correct.
weeks.
And I would think we could be back at,
3.
We-
They'll meet the 9th.
yeah. Yep, that's what I was just gonna say.
It'd be good to have the committee's input on how to do that.
Yeah, I think if you want that, it's best to change it all at one time, and then we're clean and we know exactly what we're approving, and it's, the continuity of the bylaw reads right. So, fair
Thank
enough.
you.
Okay. Good. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Director Hayes. Next up, hotel rental tax funding request, Washington County Conventions Visitors Bureau.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. Along with me today is Daniel Spedden, President, Hagerstown, Washington County Convention and Visitors Bureau. We're here this afternoon asking the board to consider a motion to approve the request for hotel rental tax funding from the Hagerstown, Washington County Convention and Visitors Bureau in the amount to be determined today by this board for direct expenses associated with the USA Cycling Amateur Road National Championships to be held June 20 to 23rd, 2019. This is the second year that Washington County has hosted the USA Cycling Amateur Road National Championship, a nationally recognized event that is expected to bring economic benefits to the region. As a host community of USAC championships, the region can anticipate increased visitor spending on lodging, food and beverage, gas, and amusements. The USAC championships will also generate labor income in the hospitality, transportation, government, health, waste, insurance, emergency services, construction, and utility sectors. This national event will elevate the profile of our community and present it as a preferred destination among cyclists. In July 2018, the USA Cycling Amateur Road National Championships event reported 672 individual athletes and 1,507 unique race registrants, and the event is predicted to attract 1,000 unique participants in 2019. On average, 2 spectators accompany each athlete. Additionally, over 30 staff members and officials will be in the region for the event. A minimum of 140 room nights will be generated from this event from staff and officials. It is anticipated that athletes and spectators will generate an additional 2,500 to 3,500 room nights during the event. Visit Hagerstown expects to see a $1.5 million impact in Washington County during the 2019 event. The total budget in 2019 is set at $180,040. The CVB is providing $76,290 for the event and has secured funding from the Maryland Sports Commission and local and national sponsors for this event, totaling $38,750. This year's budget is based upon actual costs of the 2018 race and has increased significantly, primarily due to much higher than expected traffic control costs associated with the event. The CVB has increased this year's hotel rental tax fund request from $25,000 to $65,000 to assist with these costs. The project budget for county hotel rental tax funding includes $51,414 for traffic control and detour signage and $13,586 towards the cost of law enforcement and EMS services for the event. The event meets all 7 of the Board of County Commissioners' goals and criteria for the use of hotel rental tax funds. There are no issues of outstanding obligations to the county that would prevent the organization from receiving funding. It is a recommendation of the Washington County Office of Grant Management that this application be approved in an amount determined appropriate by the Board of County Commissioners. I'm going to give Mr. Spedden some time to say anything about the event and answer any questions at this time.
That pretty much covers it. If you have any questions for me, I'm available. We're working hard every day to put on a world-class event in June, and we're hoping for some support today.
On the 3,000 room nights, approximately 2,500, 3,500, what do we, what's the motel, hotel tax contribution on an average per night?
3,500 room nights.
If it's at $100 a hotel room,
Yeah,
6% tax, is
6%.
that what you?
Hotel tax portion.
6% of the hotel rates are all over the map. It's hard.
Have an average of, say, 100.
Say 100. So
I'd say you're probably over 100 on average.
yeah, for that time of year.
So if it's 150 room, it's $9.
A room.
Yeah, $9 a room per day, of course.
Okay.
And we're saying 3.5 days.
Well, they said
3,500 room
they
night.
broke
2,700 nights then, right?
Got it. I understand what you're saying, yes.
So we're going to collect $27,000,
$21,000.
$21,000 to $30,000. Of that, you automatically get 50%, right?
Yeah, the Bureau's share of that would be
Actually,
$10,500.
because I was just looking at the request based on what we're going to get back in return in that fund, not in.
Correct. That's direct revenue to the county. Indirect revenue includes all sorts of, excise taxes and other fees paid for food and beverage and transportation and gas taxes. I mean, there's a lot of ways that the money circles back to the state and subsequently to the county. But this is the one direct payment to the county.
So based on the last time that you were in and presented, we were looking for communication with one of your employees. I don't know if it was with the title of employee.
Right.
So was that all resolved?
It depends on what your, feeling of a resolution is. We're still working on it. It seems to defy resolution. That being said, I'm hopeful that something positive will happen, that everyone will find a little peace with the situation. But the reality of it is we're all already incurring expenses, and we've made a lot of promises around the country in presenting this event. And I need to simultaneously move on with both of those. I can't wait much longer for that.
So you'd anticipated working things out by when with the individual that the county commissioners, before the two new commissioners come on?
I really can't predict when that'll happen. I can't even promise absolutely that it will, other than to say that it's always been my goal to resolve this. So that we have a strong and independent Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I answer to a board of directors. And if anyone who does business with the Bureau has a grievance with me, the remedy for them is with the board at the Bureau. And this individual has had access to them individually and in formal meetings and in the presence of an attorney. So the board of directors of the Convention and Visitors Bureau has heard the argument and is working with me toward a resolution. And I think that is where the resolution resides. And when it enters into this process, it changes the whole dynamic of that negotiation, which may or may not be fair to the Bureau, or may or may not be fair to that individual. And a good analogy is, last year we had a host hotel, and to be a host hotel is, for a big national event, is a huge economic advantage. And the collateral visitation and the elevation of your business's profile is amazing. This year, it's not the same hotel. So you suffer a little disappointment, you stay engaged with the Bureau, you wait 15 minutes, another big opportunity comes along. So if that hotel was beefing with the Bureau about that decision, how much do you want to be involved in that?
Dan, what did you request last year? Do you remember?
25,000.
25,000. You know, I can't see holding up a event for an internal dispute, but I just understand what everybody's saying, but I guess I'm more focused on the money. But, you know, everybody, internal disputes happen every day. We can't hold up a national event. I mean, that's just my opinion.
And I want to agree with you, but I know what my comment was 6 months ago when they were in the last time, and it was to come to a resolution, and I'm not so sure the resolution is here, so.
I understand, but even if it's not, if
Keep you from supporting it, I'm just trying to.
yeah, you're trying to get a resolution, yeah.
Dan, is it, so it's true that conversations have been had even since you last came before us and requested this item? Conversations have taken place since then?
Yeah, both sides have an attorney involved, and there was an offer made.
Okay. And then the project is well underway. It's going to happen,
Correct.
right? Even without the contribution, it'll happen. Just the contribution will help to ensure it's a more stable and better event.
Well, we're under contract to present the event, so whatever means it takes, we'll have to present it. The economic repercussions of failing on that contract are pretty severe. So there will be an event. How good it'll be, how safe it'll be, depends upon how much support we get. This is an expensive event to present, but the gain is enormous. This has never been held in Maryland before, so people in other counties are taking a look at this. USA Cycling is discussing with us a longer-term relationship. This is the prize. This is where we want to focus our attention. Never before has this organization presented an event in Maryland, and they're falling in love with it here. And my colleagues around the state want a crack at it, and the Maryland Sports Commission wants to keep them here. They don't just race in amateur road races. There's a spectrum of 12 or so national events that we could engage in. Mountain biking, BMX, there's all sorts of things that we could attract here. This one is a big logistical race, and it's expensive to present. Other ones, not so much. So we could do this again and not have it to be so costly for the Bureau or so engaging for county sheriffs or county roads. There's other ways that we can have an economic impact, but we have to have a solid relationship with USA Cycling to do that. And to do that, we need to put on a good event, and that's what I'm determined to do. Without the county's money, I don't know what I'll do.
Can I ask another question? This is a question for Sarah. Just bring me up to speed on it. I know this money's coming out of, so that doesn't affect our deficit right now, correct?
funding does not have an impact on our general fund revenues. It is in a separate fund, hotel rental funds, and like we spoke about earlier, we get those from hotel night stays. A percentage of that revenue does go to the CVB, and then to other municipalities as well, and we keep a portion, and we do have funding available.
We have, for just hypothetically, what they ask is 65,000. Does that affect us in a negative way, or what's that do to that fund?
No, I mean, it reduces the fund balance by the amount that the commissioners approve. However, that funding can only be used for certain items like economic development or tourism. So it is limited on what it can be used for, and this is an appropriate use.
Current balance is
Around $1 million. Around $1 million. I don't have the exact number, but it is around $1 million.
Commissioners, any more discussion?
So you're
Terry?
going to continue negotiations or discussions with,
It's always been our goal.
I just know
Yes, I will never say never.
right. So Joe, do you think that conversations are going to continue in a positive manner?
Bill? Before you begin, we really don't allow a lot from the gallery. Am I correct, Mr. Downey? What's the ruling? Well, I want a ruling. What are we allowed to allow the gallery to participate in this?
When it's affecting him, I would think.
Well, then that could be over 150,000 citizens.
Terry, I'm just not sure what this has to do with the bicycle race.
Personnel decision with CVB, and we shouldn't be involved in it whatsoever. I think we're stepping across the line. This is personnel. We're in a public discussion with a personnel issue. All apologies
I'm going to make a
presented.
decision, and I'd like to have all the facts before I make a decision on the approval or not to line up.
I don't think the gallery should be allowed to speak. And this is a personnel issue between CVB. The county's not involved in it. Mr. Downey, I'd like to ask you to speak on this so we can decide.
As a matter of meeting etiquette, I generally don't think it's a good idea to invite audience participation when the discussion is here before the public body. However, if the commissioner would like to, an answer to his question, perhaps a brief recess could be taken, or we could move, we could pass this matter for a time period and come back to it later on in our agenda.
My concern is we're discussing a personnel issue that belongs to CVB, not the county.
I'm discussing a vote for me to support or not support $65,000.
And attached to it is a personnel decision for a resolution.
Can I offer
You all
potential?
can move on with the vote. I'm
Commissioners?
just trying to present my position, Joe.
May I offer one thought that may or may not be of any interest to all of you? Would it be possible to approve a lesser amount, and perhaps that's 55,000 or 60,000, and at some later date? So, because I believe Dan's position now is for planning purposes, he must know. And the worst thing that could happen to us is to not be fully on board with what he is trying to achieve the second year in a row. Wouldn't be good for the community. So perhaps
I'm not gonna do it.
as a movement forward, some intermediary step.
I'm just not on board with having a decision for this event based on an internal personnel issue. I just don't understand how that affects. It can affect Terry's vote, but it surely won't affect what I think.
So I think this is a huge event for Washington County and the tourism and everything, and I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. But if it's all right, I would like to take Kirk's suggestion and do a 5-minute recess so that you can have your question answered in a private discussion. So if I can make that motion to go to a 5-minute recess, and you can have your discussion, then we can get that.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor of the recess, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Only have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Secretary, if we're ready, can we begin?
Yeah, I want to ask.
Where's Kirk out? There he is. All right, motion to come back into session.
You can just.
Second.
Can we reconvene? Okay, thank you. All right, let's continue the discussion.
Mr. Spedden, how critical was Mr. Jefferson in getting that event here to Washington County?
He was very much a part of that team. Yeah. It was a large team. There was a lot of expertise, but he was very much a part of it.
And I just know that he's been part of the biking community his whole, probably the last 20, 30 years, maybe well over 50% of his life. And then the other thing is, I think there's an agreement still looming out there that was sent to you all, waiting on a response from you.
There is.
Okay, so I liked our county administrator's suggestion, so if they don't support it, I'm okay with that too. I'll just not support the request. But I'd like for at least $15,000 be held back until the agreement's ironed out, and I'm just concerned about all the issues that are going to follow and plague this event for Washington County if everything's not agreed upon and resolved.
What issues are going to plague this event?
Well, who knows? I don't know who all's going to be involved. And if you remember, we had an outcry from many business leaders in the county when this was first brought to our attention.
Have you had businesses outcry or?
No, sponsorship's trending ahead of last year last year about 12.5. We're at about 24,000 now. So if that's any indication of the business community's level of excitement for the event, I'd say having experienced the event last year, everybody came back and brought a friend because we're doing really well with sponsorship.
Okay, Commissioners, we've had discussion. Is there any motion on the floor?
Was yours a motion or?
No, you all can make the motion. I would just, within the motion, I would support I would support the request of $15,000 of the amount that's awarded was to be held back until everything was ironed out.
I mean, if there's no more discussion, I mean, I personally, I want to just make so I'll just do it. I'll make the motion for $65,000 to go directly to the CVB for this event. I think if our goal is to have more events and continue this relationship with USA Cycling, I don't think we need to be having these controversies and making sure that the county and the community, the business community is behind this because this is bringing a lot of tourism, a lot of people to our county spending money at our restaurants and stuff. So I make the motion for $65,000.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it with a comment that I just don't feel right getting into a labor dispute. I'm not a mediator, and no more than I'd be a mediator in any other community organization. I second the motion.
Okay, first and a second. Is there any more discussion?
Just some comment. I'm going to support the $65,000 as well. I think it's a good event. I think there's good people on both sides, and I don't want the event to get any negative publicity. This is a good thing for the county. Good people on both sides, so I agree.
All right, there's discussion over. I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
No.
4-1, it passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Next up. Adoption of Health Advisory Commission bylaws.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Susan Small, Director of Business Development. Today I'm here to present a motion to adopt the proposed Board of Health Advisory Commission bylaws as presented in your packets. On September 20th of 2018, the Economic Development Commission, the EDC, was charged with reinstating the dormant Health Advisory Committee, who has not met as a group over the last 8 to 10 years. The goal was to reinstate the Health Advisory Committee based upon the existing bylaws and then make suggestions and revisions as needed. To do so, the Economic Development Commission formed a small work group of diverse community representation to discuss, review, and gather recommendations for reestablishing the Health Advisory Committee. The work group met in October three times in October actually, and presented their report to the Economic Development Commission in November. A summary or update of the discussions was also presented to the Board of County Commissioners in October and then again in January of 2019. The report included suggestions for minor revisions to the existing bylaws and restructuring of the membership. The Department of Business Development met and coordinated with the work group, as well as the county attorney, to finalize their proposed Health Advisory Commission bylaws and is now ready to move forward with reinstating the organization under the Board of County Commissioners' purview. We have, like I said, we've met with both the county attorney, Kirk Downey, and our county administrator, Robert Slocum, to discuss the bylaws. Any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question. I suppose some of the bylaws came from materials from the last set of bylaws we had for this
Yes.
committee. I'm just kind of curious. There are 5 positions that are related to the construction field, which certainly should be represented, but there's not any position that I can see that's just a member at large. Are we heavy on that industry? Should we have more just members of the general public involved in this? And I know everyone's a citizen. I understand
Right.
that, but
I think there was quite a few. We had a larger group selected, and I think we sort of narrowed it down to the really main focus so that the group wasn't enormous enough to not accomplish what they needed to accomplish. And I think there's been a push to have some representation from construction specifically for development in the area because of some challenges they've been faced with. So, I mean, if that's a recommendation, we can certainly talk about that.
it was just, I want to make sure this is the Board of Health, and they'll serve an important role. And I just, would broader perspectives be, important on this committee?
Commissioner, I'd like to offer that the first 5 to 6, member 6 business community, but the first, which may be at large, the first 5 are medical community, dental community, veterinary community, Board of Education, behavioral health community. There was a goal to meet a balanced and diverse group, and that was the intent here with those representatives, both from the plan review, emergency services is also on here because of the impact, as we've mentioned, of various opioid crisis and so forth. So we intended to take a very diverse approach to this, and ironically, number 6 being somewhat in the middle, that business community is no representation from any particular and could be an at-large.
Yeah, and I'm just for the record, I'm certainly not questioning members of the health community. That certainly makes sense. I think maybe we're a little heavy on the construction side of the equation.
Well, what we
My
heard,
thought.
it's certainly a fair comment and observation. What we heard from the board previously, and the reason I believe that the EDC was charged with coming up with these bylaws, is because the business community and development community was finding some difficulty either at the state or local level with some development issues that we wanted to re-engage this group for more input. I think that's why it went through the EDC, or that's why the previous board charged the EDC with this, coming up with this task. So,
Am I off base saying that the reason maybe is we've had a lot of gray areas and trouble spots in the building community from engineering because of numerous things, well, septic, site plans, is that correct?
that's right, and that's not to say any particular agency, whether state or local, but there has been question, and we felt that the health department may need support in defending those questions, or getting those questions answered, or defending the positions that they have.
Commissioners, any more questions? There's recommended motion to adopt. A motion?
You asking for,
Yes, recommended motion to adopt as presented.
I motion to adopt bylaws as presented. We haven't had, I've been on ex officio and we haven't had a meeting yet.
Is there a second?
I'm still on the way.
Discussion? Anything? Hearing no discussion, all in favor to adopt, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0, thank you.
Thank you.
Like
Next up,
the EDC played a large part.
Director
Thank you.
Eichelman, please take the the table. Thank you very much, sir. Requests to approve adjustments at the Highway Department.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Here following up on last week's presentation regarding Highway Department organizational plan. Seeking a motion for the County Commissioners to approve the organizational adjustments within the Highway Department. Just to summarize, we did advertise the Deputy Director of Public Works Highway Department position that would be replacing Ed Plank. So we're currently in the process of working to fill that position. And I have before you a proposed plan to support the new Highway Director as well as elevate a minimum of 2 and possibly up to 3 highway personnel, existing highway personnel, to promote some efficiencies within the department. So I know last week I covered a fair amount of material, and you had asked for additional time to consider the request. So I can cover the material again or answer any questions that you may have regarding the organization.
Number of positions that are,
Remains at 88. So essentially we're shifting personnel, allowing opportunities for some advancement, not changing the overall number of Highway Department employees.
I have one question or comment on this. After talking to other people in the Highway Department, I know we're replacing the Deputy Director. One of the comments after this is, should, once we get that position hired, should then that person, whoever that ends up being, should also be in it looking at this and also hiring whoever is going to be the supervisor of highway operations. I don't want to hire 2 new people when I guess hiring the new Deputy Director I think should go first, and then once we do that, I think that person should also be on board of hiring the possible new supervisor.
Yes, that's certainly the phase plan here, and that's why we mentioned that we're currently working on filling Ed Plank's position. So that'll certainly happen much sooner than whoever the supervisor of highway operations individual will be. And that person in that position would come from within the Highway Department. So they would anticipate coming on board and being up to speed from day one.
Now, just I'm going to use Randy's quote, devil's advocate. What happens if this new Deputy Director comes on in from an outside agency and he has a new plan for this and says, hey, I think if we switch this and switch this, are we getting the cart before the horse on this? Or you're thinking with you and Ed that this is an excellent plan and you're going to be working with that new Deputy Director?
I mean, I think we've looked at this in a number of different ways, and that whoever that person is, I think it's going to be a support. And part of the request is reality that there's a lot of expectations on this position. Mm-hmm. It's certainly grown even during Ed's tenure, the amount of administrative requirements, permitting requirements, compliance, MS4. So what we've seen is a lot more emphasis on a need to cover those requirements. And so certainly if there's strengths in one area and strengths in another, I think those 2 individuals can trade off those responsibilities. But there's certainly more than enough requirements to go around. But that being said, these are also people that in their job description, they are expected to operate equipment. They're responsible to chip in. So that's where I say we're keeping the number of personnel the same number-wise and kind of shifting, I think, to adapt where we see the need for the Highway Department, both now and then also what it's going to look like in 5 and 10 years from now.
I'd be in support of waiting to the Ed Plank's replacement was hired and have that new person involved in this restructuring. Since it'll be his to inherit, I thought the new person would want to be involved in the restructuring. I That's just my opinion.
There's also a lot to be said for trying to hire somebody to know that there's no assistant there to support them during their operations. So this may make the position more attractive to know that there's someone there at a grade 16 to come in.
You can hire his assistant and be part of that process.
I think that this basic structure should be looked at, and I thank you for this. I think I agree that we should have this position. This supervisor of highway operations should be a position, but like I said earlier, I do think that, and I'm glad you agree with that, the deputy director should be in hiring on whoever that person is. But
Yes, that's certainly been the plan all along, and a lot of this is just to, like Rob mentioned, I think it's a way to support that individual. Also know that when we're looking at the qualifications and experience that each of those individuals have, and that's gonna, I think, in many ways it could affect the decision that needs to be made as to who that person is. Because if I only know with 100% certainty that I have essentially deputy director of public works highway department position to fill, then I might consider and evaluate the candidates a little bit different than if I know that this plan is in place and I have an additional
I think what
support
we're hearing,
coming
the
along.
commissioners support the plan. We just want the new director to be part of the process of hiring the supervisor, right? Is that what you're saying?
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so you can be assured,
Okay.
I think right now that that's probably going to happen, but I think what I'm saying, Court, not to summarize your words, we'd like to have a Plank's replacement in part
Certainly.
of this
Yes,
discussion
that's-
for his evaluation. I support the plan,
Okay.
but that's the only caveat I throw at you. So,
I would agree with that. I think that would be a good approach. Good plan. We're not saying that, but let the EDS replacement have a hand in picking their direct subordinate. I think that's, something that we've done in other positions. I think that's a good thing since they have to work closely together. I think that's a good plan.
Yeah, just for clarification, Ed's last day is Friday. Okay, so Ed's position is up for interviews, and that position will be chosen very shortly. This is a position we would like to know that the commissioners approve of, so we can proceed eventually
I'd like to wait
with
to see the
advertising.
director appointed first before I move forward.
Okay, and the other thing is that Andrew's position, if there is a problem at the highway department, you're going to be facing Andrew and you're going to be facing me and asking me. So without a position there, certainly Ed, and what happens is that you ask me or you ask Andrew typically. And you'll be coming to me as your administrator. I'm asking you, when you decide to approve this, that we move forward quickly, because the structure in place is necessary to run the operation that at the level you want it run.
Well, I don't think we're delaying the hiring of Ed's replacement, the deputy division director, the deputy director for highways. I don't think we're delaying that position, so that we still want that to go in the timeline that it's going. And if there's a gap in employment, maybe we could look at, we have the drop plan. We know when certain individuals might be retiring, and maybe Ed didn't take his full 5 years. I don't know. But we had some advance notice, so I don't think we're advocating for a gap and not having that position filled. Continue on,
I think we're speaking the
filling
same thing with what my intentions were, which is to get we'll call it the deputy director, the head of the highway department position filled, because like I said, I certainly want to know who that individual is before moving on to the next phase. We just want to know that the structure will be in place and that we can move forward with that in mind. So I think we're speaking the same thing in terms of the timing.
And you might also have the benefit of having the new deputy director, maybe after a couple months on the job, maybe they feel might be a greater deficiency, a different area within that department that needs to focus, and not necessarily as the next.
Aren't you here for? Aren't we supposed to approve this reorganization? Why would we not approve it? If if he's saying he's not hiring that green step there, then why aren't we just go ahead and approving it? And he's going to hire a director, and then
What if the new deputy director has a different plan?
Well, we can sit around for 2 years waiting on that.
I'd just rather wait the higher ed plan's replacement and then bring the replacement into this plan. That's my thoughts. If we do, I'll vote no today.
So
There's where
if
I'm.
if I can
Pressure, yeah.
if I can make a suggestion then, because I agree with Andrew and I agree with our county administrator Rob here that from bringing somebody in, we already hiring this, and maybe we're not going to define the bottom line of this chart, but I think that what we can do is say that we're going to be opening up this new position of the supervisor of highway operations, so that we're hiring the new deputy director and saying, hey, the deputy director is going to be able to have this position. Maybe this final little structure is not exactly like it is, but we will be opening up that position. That's going to help with bringing somebody brand new in, if that is somebody new, or if it's hiring somebody. I think it's going to be helping with that structure. That's, if people would be amenable to that, that's how I would like to look forward.
You're saying we're going to hire it within for the supervisor position. We're not putting it out.
Correct.
And what's the budget cut we're asking to the highway department? Is there a dollar figure?
I don't know if cut's the right way. Essentially, where we're at is with retirements of the director position, there's some payroll savings that we're shifting around. So in terms of, is it a cut or are you saying a savings?
What's how you want to present it public relations wise? We had a $750,000 overrun or expenses above our snow removal.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where we talked about this a little bit before. There's the payroll aspect of certainly what's going to show up in that line item, and then certainly the other, I don't want to say intangible amount, but the other thing that we're trying to work on, which is the asset management component of highway department work. So yes, there's a lot of material that's placed, salt, in a snow removal operations. So if we can look at that, look at what roads we're treating with what application rate, whether or not we're hitting those with every storm, is it a storm of certain types of temperatures, snow accumulation, looking at the calibration rates. There's a number of ways you can go about making sure that when that truck goes down the road, that it's not just applying more material than it needs to. I think that's just one application where you apply a little work into looking at some of those things to potentially realize some savings, but that may not show up because every year and every storm is going to be different. So you may see some trends, but that's certainly the hope, that having personnel with that experience can look at those things in different areas. The same thing we could talk about in pavement maintenance applications. So that would be the hope of having someone in this role with those skill sets, because things are trending more that way, I think.
So basically, the new highway deputy director or the director is not going to have any say in this organizational chart. Once we
well, I think that's what we're discussing, whether or not you go ahead and say you're comfortable now, or go ahead and just hire the individual and come back again at a later time.
And I'd rather wait.
Just hire the individual. You're talking about hiring the
Ed's replacement.
Okay.
One of the things we need to do a better job on is succession planning. If we'd had Ed's replacement hired a month ago, I don't know what time frame he gave on his notice on that with his drop program, but we need to be looking at that. We wouldn't be having this discussion. All right, commissioners, any more comments before a motion or no motion is made?
And I understand everyone's concerned with having the deputy director finalize the highway department organizational chart, but I would still be, since that's not going to happen, I guess I would like to make the motion to open the new position of this supervisor of highway operations.
I don't get that motion.
The reason why is if we're
Just approve the, pardon me,
exactly, I want to approve that new position.
but not hire the position.
Not hire the position until we get the new director, deputy director in there. So we've got that position in there. And if there's a little bit of tweaks to how it ends up being done, there's a little bit of tweaks of how it ends up being done with the new deputy director. But I also do believe it's going to make that position a much more viable position. And I do believe it's a needed position. Now, how that finally opens up and breaks out, if we're willing to do that, I think that's going to help with Andrew and planning. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah, I agree with that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm confused. Maybe I'm the one here confused. But you're going to hire. We all seem to be the highway department. The deputy director is going to be hired. I think we're all in agreement with that. I think we're all in agreement. You can hire the supervisor of highway operations after the fact. Correct.
Correct.
So and Andrew runs the show, not the deputy director. And if he thinks that's the best way, why are we not just approving the whole structure with hiring after the fact the supervisor? Why are we waiting until a deputy director comes in and wants to change all this around when Andrew's running the show? I don't get this.
I don't think we're going to get enough votes to make that happen.
I think the new,
We haven't had that position in Washington County for, I believe, at least 250 years.
A supervisor.
yeah, I think.
We also have a lot more roads than we did 250 years ago.
I mean,
My tires are rubber now. So
all right, there's a first. There's a motion?
I need to, never mind.
I'm going to go ahead and go out and let my motion to accept it with the way it's organized with hiring the supervisor of highway after the director's
Does
hired.
that match your, restate the motion for
You
clarity?
got a motion on the floor from court, right?
So you
Is
have
there
to
a second to court's motion?
Let me hear that motion again.
restate the motion.
My motion is very simple, just to open the new position of supervisor of highway operations. Approve the new position.
The position, but not to hire.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Then I will withdraw my motion.
Motion fails. Is there any other motion to be made?
Well, this is a waste of time, but I motion we accept it the way it's organized and approve supervisor of highway operations after the director is hired. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have first and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. What was that down there?
No.
3 noes? 3 noes, 3
You down
to-
this way, you a third?
I'm the third, I'm a no. Motion doesn't carry at the time. Thank you.
You weren't getting your three anyway.
I know.
All right. And now I think we have the resolution for changing our resident agent. Attorney Kirk Downey, you're on the floor.
Thank you. Commissioners, the Maryland Code Local Government article requires that certain units of state government, including counties, have a resident agent who is designated to accept process or lawsuits on behalf of the county and the Board of County Commissioners. The county attorney has traditionally served as a resident agent. This is simply authorizing change in the resident agent from Mr. Martirano to myself. Requires a resolution, and then appropriate certification will be sent to the state.
I'll make a motion to approve the change in resident.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Any discussion? Hearing none. Motion to approve is discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next. CFO Sarah, please. Understand, no recommended motion. This is for informational purpose only, correct? Thank you. Got it back there.
Oh, it's because mine's in my office.
Is it?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sarah Grieve, Chief Financial Officer. I'm here to discuss 10-year projections for enterprise funds. This is for your information only. Enterprise funds are used to account for a government's ongoing organization and activities that are similar to businesses found in the private sector. These funds are considered self-supporting in that services rendered by them are generally financed through user charges or on a cost reimbursement basis. They are used to account for any activity which a fee is charged to external users for goods or services. The county uses enterprise funds to account for the following: the airport, transit, golf course, solid waste, water, and sewer. The airport, transit, and golf course funds receive a contribution from the general fund to help provide for annual operating costs. The airport receives a minimal annual appropriation of around $15,000, which represents only 1% of their budget. Public transit is funded primarily through grants, however, does receive a general fund contribution of around $485,000, which represents about 21% of their budget. And the golf course receives approximately 26% of their budget, or $320,000 from the general fund. The solid waste, water, and sewer are also enterprise funds. However, these funds are self-supporting enterprise funds. An appropriation from the general fund is less likely with the water, sewer, or solid waste funds due to their self-supporting nature. There is an appropriation that comes from the general fund to the solid waste fund, and that appropriation is to support non-supporting activities such as the closed sites or the recycling program. So in that instance, that is a deemed appropriate appropriation. These funds, the solid waste, water, and sewer, have issued debt to fund capital projects to support their operations and to comply with increasing regulation. It is expected that user fees be enough to provide for the fund's operational costs, including cost of debt service. In the event that the general fund would contribute to these funds, there may be certain ramifications to be considered. Having self-supported water and sewer funds is something that the county has worked towards over the last 20 years, and it is a status that has come to be expected from the rating agencies. The importance of this approach is to have the users of the system pay for the system's cost. If the fund cannot support itself, it may lose its self-supported status, which may affect the way that rating agencies view our county. If these funds are not self-supported, their debt burden could then be included into the county's financial ratios that are used by the rating agencies. So that's how that would affect us if we would increase an appropriation to them. The rating agencies do give support and acknowledgement to our county for management of resources and maintaining self-supported enterprise funds. The county does desire to keep our rating to continue to finance with the lowest possible cost, saving hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars. In addition, the rating is an important tool for economic development and shows the county's financial stability. So there is an attachment, a 10-year projection for these enterprise funds. I direct you to that and just wanted to take a minute to go over these in a little bit of detail. Behind every line that you see here, there's airport, transit, solid waste, golf, water, sewer. There is a several-page document that I use to prepare these numbers. And there are assumptions that are used with these, which include 2.5% wage increases. They include a 2% operating cost increase. If it's a fund that does have debt service, it includes the actual debt service schedule that we face today. So I've used the information that I have available to try to get an accurate 10-year projection for you. However, please understand it is just a projection, and the further out we go, the more soft it gets. So the airport fund, just for your information, if you take a look at that, the airport fund is actually in really good condition. We do show an appropriation from the general fund in 2019. However, thereafter, we do not show one. I'll be talking a little bit more about that in my next session. So I'd like to move on down to the transit fund. The transit fund does use a bit of their fund balance to balance their budget. So this assumption includes a reduced use of fund balance until that fund balance is depleted, in addition to an increase of general fund appropriation simultaneously to be able to balance the fund. And if you take the 2020 general fund appropriation and the 2029 appropriation, you'll see it's about $60,000 a year that this transit fund would possibly increase generally, and that would be an increase of an appropriation from the general fund. that's not too bad. That's kind of to be expected. Go ahead.
Real quick question, I'm sorry. This effect on general fund, so that line is what you're saying is coming out of our general fund, going into,
That's correct. Going
Okay.
into the transit fund. Yes. So for 2019 is 485,000. In 2020 it shows 634. That amount's actually going to be reduced to about 580. We've had some budget tweaks, but we will see an increase year over year for support of the transit fund. It is primarily funded through grants, and they do have some fees there as well. Yes, but that line, effect on general fund, is the total general fund appropriation for each of those years.
thank you.
Sarah, a question on the transit.
Sure.
So the user fee, the ridership fee, who sets that? Is that something that we have any control over since we receive so much funding from the state for that program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we wanted to increase fees, we could. Yeah, definitely.
It was just a question.
An
of
option.
who
Yes.
sets that.
Okay. So where transit does show an increase in general fund contribution year over year, it is something that I think would be sustainable with, our general revenues that would most likely increase year over year. Solid waste is the next fund, and this fund does show an appropriation from the general fund of $427,000 for 2020. And that appropriation does show throughout the next 10 years. Again, like I said before, that dollar figure represents an appropriation to solid waste for non-supported activities such as the recycling program or the closed sites. So it's okay, in essence, that there's an appropriation from the general fund to support those activities. The landfill fees that may be talked about later support the open sites and the ongoing operations of those sites. So as you can see here with solid waste, we have included under the expenditure line item the debt service schedule that we anticipate. And you will see that we actually are in a pretty good position if you're looking past 2021, you see there's an excess of 700,000. That's good news. The next year, 2022, and that's right above that gray line if you're looking at solid waste, there's only excess of 40,000. So why is there that jump? And that's related to the debt service schedule. So we do have some fluctuation coming up in the next couple years. However, that will then level out after 2024. So we'll see a more steady schedule after that point. I also wanted you to note when looking at this for solid waste that in 2022, I have built in a potential for a lease program of equipment. We're going to talk a little bit more about equipment costs later as well, but that is in here as something that we would like to plan for potentially if there are no changes made to the solid waste fund, which I know has also been a topic of discussion. So I don't have any real concerns about solid waste for the next 10 years. If we want to move to golf, we will see that this appropriation to golf does increase about $30,000 a year as well. So we do anticipate contributing more money to golf over the course of the next 10 years. I know certain things are being looked at the golf course as well. So, and these numbers, they could definitely change. They are subject to change. This is what we see right now. This is not set in stone, but it is a snapshot of what we think may happen for the future. And that's why I felt important to bring it into you to show you.
But you're basing this off of previous projections.
I'm basing these figures off of the FY19 budget number, but also the actuals that we have experienced this year, and then the 2020 budget, and then I've taken those figures and I've moved them forward. So I've included, a 2.5% wage increase. I've included operating cost increasing about 2% per year. I've taken what I've seen from revenue increases over the past 5 years and taken that average percentage and, move that forward as well. So I've taken a balanced and, normal approach to trying to create this for you.
Sarah, I thought somewhere along the way in our discussions on the golf course, I assume we're just talking about Black Rock,
That's
right?
correct.
That we were projecting a $400,000 subsidy to the golf course.
Yeah.
Is that
so
right? Which line item does that fall into?
That is correct. So that would be under golf effect on the general fund, 309, 325. So we would have to look at that 2020 number. It depends on where our revenues and expenditures come in to determine what the actual appropriation will be. I will tell you, when I developed this long-range financial projection, it was about a month ago, so there could be a variable there to be considered.
Yeah, Wayne, I think that from what I've been involved with BlackRock, that I'd be very surprised. I'd be very surprised if it didn't turn direction a little bit and head back to less of a loss with everything that's been going on, what they're planning and new organizations. And
Right,
I don't think it's going to make us any money, but I think it's going to go the right direction, which is.
I was just asking which line item it goes under. I was looking for a $400,000 amount. That's what we were told.
Yeah.
325 is still big, but.
Okay. Below that, you'll see water. There are the same assumptions here with water. These numbers do include the debt service schedule for water, and they do include rate increases every year. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. You'll see a little bit more on that in my next presentation. But I think the important thing to capture here, and what I'm trying to capture for you, is that on the gray line, it does appear that we would need a small contribution each year from the general fund. This is heavily dependent on, also any build out. We heard earlier a little bit about water customers, and there's a density issue. We have a low number of customers, so if that customer base increases, these numbers will likely reduce, and we won't need as much of a contribution. But this is something to be aware of and to consider. And the reason this is starting now is because we are depleting our fund balance. So now we're at that crossroads where we've used what we could out of the fund balance. How do we keep the fund going after that? And sewer as well. Sewer doesn't paint a very good picture for 2020 to 2023. However, then the picture starts to get better. As you notice on the gray line, there is an effect of they will be out of cash, so we will need some type of appropriation or loan, which we can talk about here. I have in the ARF, what is the solution to some of these water and sewer issues that we face. The county's sewer fund, as stated previously, will experience a negative cash flow in 2019. There are a couple options to consider when looking at this. One, we could raise rates sufficient to cover the negative cash position. Two, we could raise rates incrementally and adopt a plan over several years or 5 to 10 years to correct the problem, which may include accepting a loan from the general fund. And then third, we could provide for the deficiency with a general fund appropriation for the years that we see those large negative figures, and then stop the appropriation once the sewer fund can get itself back on track. So
what's your opinion, without raising, what's the next best option?
Without raising water sewer rates?
Right. You gave us 3 options. Is there?
You said we could do it in incrementations, but I know a bunch of people say we've been raising it every year.
And we have, and we have.
Yeah. So, and incrementations would be above what we've average of what we've been raising.
Yeah, in the next presentation I have for water and sewer, I'm going to show a couple different scenarios which may help with this picture, because yes, we have been raising rates. They have increased over year over year. Honestly, and maybe Dan should be talking about this, but honestly, with the MDE regulations, I mean, we just saw a recent example of our Smithsburg wastewater treatment plant double in cost because of a regulation from MDE. So we're not making it up. These are true costs, and they are heavily related to regulations from MDE. My personal opinion is, whatever we decide to do, I'd like to get a plan in place, we need a plan moving forward. So
What was the third option?
the third option was to provide for the deficiency with just a straight general fund appropriation. So we say, okay, sewer fund, you need 2.7 million or whatever at the end of the year, whatever your loss is, that's what you need. That's what we're going to give you to not have a negative cash position.
If we have a 3.9 shortage, where's our money in the general fund and to supplement that?
Right.
It's not there.
So it's really not an option.
So I think one of the options that was briefly said was a loan to the sewer fund, because if we were giving if you're giving the money to them, then that's spreading it across all the taxpayers. So then taxpayers are then subsidizing the sewer rates for somebody that might have a septic tank and whatever, they're not using it. As a loan, as we're looking at this fund coming back at 2023, it's a self-sustaining fund. And if we loaned money from the general fund to the sewer, then it would be able to get repaid back. And so then you're not at that point, then I'm not charging spreading that across all the taxpayers. It could get paid back. That's something I think we can look at on the sewer side. It does not look like that's even an option on the water side.
Right.
But that's a way of not making all the taxpayers subsidize this for 4 years. I think it's a very valid way of doing it.
Your thoughts on that, Sarah?
Both of these scenarios for both water and sewer do continue to use the assumption of rate increases every year. So I think that that's something that's been discussed in this group, certainly, when I've heard.
When will the rate increases stop?
Honestly, Terry, I don't have a date for you for when they would.
Because when they redid all of the debt, and I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago, it was supposed to have an ending.
I think that
increase.
it's hard to foresee the different regulations that come down from
understand that.
MDE.
On this scenario, though, if we at 2023, if we funded it out of the general fund at 2023, it's a self-sustaining fund. The sewer rate could stop increasing.
It would need to, my suggestion on that would be to build it back up to maintain its 25% cash reserve requirement. That's what we need to get back to as well. So now we're in a negative position. We got to get that 25% back as well. But yeah, once that 25% is met, there could be further discussion on how much over the 25% the commissioners would feel comfortable with.
You know what that figure is right now, Sarah?
25%? I believe it is around 2.5 million.
That's a percentage.
25% of the operation and maintenance cost is about $2.5 million.
Okay, so that's our goal.
That's our goal. That's our target.
What's our actual?
Oh, what's our actual? Well, at the end of FY18, I believe it was 200,000. I have it in my drawer if you need me to get it. But it was definitely enough. It was low enough for me to be able to be comfortable here to say we will end FY19 in a negative position. So we do have to do something.
For the $2.5 million, if you're looking at the overruns here, again, not saying we upfronted that money, you're getting $2.5 million by the midway through 2026 with the current rate increases. So at some point, going back at some point, I think we would be able to stop the rate increases. But also, if we're loaning the money, there's 6.8 million dollars. We got to recover. If we're loaning, you got to recover 6.8 million dollars before we can get to 2.5 million dollars.
Right. So it's a longer. It would
Stretches
extend. It really would. So the county's cash reserve policy does state that the county will maintain the 25% reserve, which amounts to approximately 90 days of working capital. In the event that reserves fall below the stated minimum, the county will budget the replenishment of the reserve over a certain period deemed by the county commissioners. So that's, I wanted to bring this information to you today. It does coincide with my next presentation as well. I'm not asking for any action today, but for your awareness, this should be further discussed to determine which way the county would like to move forward.
So what are the anticipated water and sewer rate increases?
For this plan,
Well, this,
there are, we're going to get into that. Do you, yep.
just tell me to sit tight.
Okay, sit tight. We're getting there. Okay. Are there any other questions on this before I move to our enterprise budgets and rate discussions?
We can come back to it if.
Certainly. Yep. I'll just put it right here. Okay. I'm going to ask, Dan DeVito and Dave Mason to come up here with me for this first discussion on solid waste. Tiffany did bring in books for everyone, so we'll be referencing some of the tabs in your books. So the solid waste budget should be on tab 17 of your book. And if you want to move to that tab, you'll see there is a summary sheet. That's primarily what we'll be working off of today, along with the presentation on the screen. It's a big book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I have Dave Mason, Deputy Director of Solid Waste, and Dan DeVito, Division Director of Environmental Management with me. They were instrumental in developing this budget, as well as our staff, Daryl Brown. And so as you can see on the screen, solid waste budget is reducing from the FY19 budget of $8.1 million, and the 2020 budget is projected to be $7.7 million, a reduction of about $400,000. With every budget, there's revenue changes and there's expense changes. The revenue changes include a general fund reduction of $534,000 due to the reduced debt service cost. Last year, there was a spike in debt service for FY19. I say last year, but for FY19. So that appropriation that was an additional appropriation has now been removed. The fund balance from FY19, there was a fund balance that was used to balance the fund. That has been removed based on available reserves. And we have seen tipping fee increase of about $660,000. So that's based on current trends and an increase in rates. Major budget changes related to the expenditures are the debt service for $559,000 based on the debt service schedule. An increase to pension of $109,000. The increase is related to the percent of wages that the pension cost is. So last in FY19, the percentage was 18%. This year, the percentage is 28%. It did not actually increase that differential over a 1-year period. I'd like to inform you because this is going to affect all of our budgets across the board. In FY19, under the General Operations Department of the General Fund, there was an amount in that department for pension. It was a large amount, about $4 million. So what happened was that amount got tucked into that General Operations Department instead of spread out through the enterprise funds. So we're correcting that. We need to spread that cost out to the enterprise funds where it belongs, and that's part of the reason for this increase. You also see that in the water sewer funds. Contract services increased by $110,000. That includes drop-off, hauling, and other maintenance contract services. You see the reserve there, $46,000. That is an expense line in the budget, but that is to help us build up our reserves for solid waste. So we're going to talk about it in a little bit. We've had some reductions to our reserves based on the 19 budget and certainly some equipment that we need to repair. So this is an effort to try to increase the funding level of our reserves. And then the other minor change, closure, post-closure costs reduced to $60,000 based on the costs we experienced for FY18. So along with that discussion, we have had increased equipment costs. Some of the costs you see up on the screen, you know, they do add up to about $175,000. Plus, most recently in January, there was approval to transfer $800,000 out of the reserves to repair compactors that needed repaired. This essential piece of equipment for solid waste, and that's why it had to be taken from reserves. So this is an example of why we look to increase our reserves in the future and replenish that account. So looking ahead, we look to build cash reserves and potentially implement a lease program for equipment needs out at solid waste. There are things that we're doing to reduce costs. I think this is really important to see. There will be we will be eliminating a vacant position in the solid waste fund, so that will further help the bottom line.
What is that position?
And what's the wage and benefits?
It will be an operator position later in this year due to retirement. Savings would probably be $130,000 if you include benefits and overtime and wages.
What was that dollar amount?
Roughly 130. That's everything. That's benefits, you know, retirement,
Health insurance, pension,
overtime. That's everything included.
And I think also we should point out that there was a retirement in January of Kathy Mills, the assistant superintendent, or the assistant director of the landfill. And since that retirement, the way that we're going to address that position is we're going to consolidate 2 other positions, which will, instead of replacing her position, that consolidation will result in additional savings, and it'll also result in 1 less position in the office. So we are working to do whatever we can to reduce those controllable expenses that we have available to us.
There's also been definitely controlled management of capital costs. We have reduced the capital plan from 2019 to 2020 by about $4.5 million. So that comes back as a savings for the future debt service that the fund will experience. And of course, as discussed in previous meetings, there is research going on related to the waste to energy or some other use of the solid waste fund. So we'll continue all of those things.
And I can assure you that we are aggressively looking at alternatives and what we can do to change the way that we, and what are the options that we have for the long range and for the long-term operation of the landfill. That's something that's high on our priority list, and we're aggressively looking at other options. We have, there's several restrictions that are placed on us, that the way that we have to operate the landfill. But within those restrictions, we think there are some opportunities that we may be able to take advantage of. And we are aggressively working on that, and to the point where we're even including our advisory board, our citizen advisory board, to try to get some input from them to see if our ideas are something that makes sense to the general public. So hopefully we'll be able to come back to you soon with some options and some ideas on how we can address a long-term fix for the landfill.
Okay.
A good start would be $250,000.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So these fee increases that are coming before you today were proposed last year. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. They were not approved last year. They were last increased in 2011. And with that, we'd like to align the costs that we face for certain services that are provided, and then use some of those fee increases to help build our reserve. And in front of you, you have those increases. Tires, individual, are proposed to go from $3 to $5. Tires, small, per ton, from $162 to $200. Mattresses, which currently there's no charge for.
No, it's just
It's the minimum.
under minimum trash, yes.
It's the minimum fee. We would like a separate rate for the mattresses of $10. And then the minimum fee is currently $10, and we're proposing that to increase to $15. Those total an increase of around $180,000 to the fund.
I thought you just told us revenues were up at the landfill.
Revenues are up. However, revenues are up, but the general fund appropriation went down significantly, as well as the fund balance reserve went down. So those are two revenues that we no longer have. The revenue from the landfill is up, but not enough.
Plus $200,000 in salaries that you've eliminated, right? Are going to eliminate.
Part of that is only a partial year, I believe.
Right, correct.
And the other would be a direct reduction.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that helps too.
Yes, sir.
Are those expenditures put in this 10-year projected, those savings?
Those savings are not, and they would be additional savings to the fund to be considered. Yep.
Well, that's almost 400,000 right there. Just two employees that aren't going to be replaced, and what's at the bottom line on that chart?
Yeah, one would be a mid-year reduction. I'm not sure when that person is retiring that you were.
It's actually end of July or August. So
Oh,
it's almost a full year, not quite.
That's my brother-in-law.
Yes.
Okay, and I knew about that
But
one.
I think it should be pointed out too that by delaying the increases that were asked for last year, that's one of the reasons that we ended up with as much expense in the equipment, to maintain the equipment. And to move forward with that lease program, I mean, basically what we've done in the recent years is that we've delayed a lot of the upgrade and maintenance on that equipment. And it's gotten to the point now where we're really in a hole and we're trying to dig out. And that's one of the reasons that we feel that the way that we can do that is by advocating for a rate increase. And also the increases in revenue historically have been up and down. It depends on what's going on in the economy. We'd love to say that this trend is going to continue, but we can't bank on it. And if it doesn't, then we're back in the same boat with aging equipment that is in some cases could end up to be potentially a safety hazard for our employees. So we're really aggressively trying to make sure that we take care of that issue.
Can you explain, I mean, the first three on here for the increase, they're all, you've got good answers for it. But can you explain why the minimum fee increase, how, because all the others have costs associated with it that have increased, but what's the cost associated with the minimum wage?
It's just a way to try to generate a little bit of revenue to help cover some of those costs, whether it's leasing equipment or equipment repairs. It's just a way to try to generate.
Yeah, so that's a revenue generator. So that's not trying to, like the others are offsetting some other additional increase in cost.
Yes.
Remember, we would like to try to replenish that $800,000 that the commissioners just, generously let us transfer to meet an emergency. And that's one thing that we have to try to replenish and build that money back up, because that money came out of another area that is needed for the future.
And we don't want to get ourselves into a situation where we continue to use a fund balance that maybe we don't have.
So back to that minimum fee. That's for up to how much weight? That would probably cover you up for probably 550 pounds, roughly. So if you brought in up to 550 pounds, it would cost you $15.
So if I brought in 551, how much is it going to cost me?
$15.50. After that 550 pounds or whatever that exact number is, then we'd,
What do y'all charge a ton?
It's $55 a ton for regular residential trash right now.
I guess I would be, if somebody brought in, because when I go to the dump, I've got a dump pass. But sometimes, I know before I had that, I'd go in and I just was paying the minimum fee no matter what, because there was no way I was going to get close to that amount of weight. And seeing, the $15, is that, what do we do? I guess I'd rather see the the whole thing go up, then jump in the minimum wage if I'm going to drop off, 2 TVs or whatever it is, But,
I'll loan you $5, Gordon.
well, thank you.
We can certainly look into, how to get the same kind of revenues from increasing the tonnage. We increased the tonnage last year by $3 a ton.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's a route you want us to explore, I can definitely come back with that number.
And that's one of the reasons that we looked at that particular fee, because we did raise the tonnage last year. And when was the last time we raised the?
I think it was 2011.
2011 was kind of the broad brush increase over many items.
And I think that's something too to be considered. I mean, there were many, many, many years of no increases. And so here we are.
Yeah, I mean, like you said before, we're trying to get caught up. Our equipment's old. We're putting more money in the equipment than what it's worth on a regular basis. A lease program would go a long way to
try to
helping us
satisfy
do our
some of
job
those
better, is basically what it boils down to. So
the additional increases that are being requested are for the regular residential permit, which you see on the screen, from $130 to $140. Second permit, same residence from $65 to $70, a $5 increase. Regular residential permit, $65 to $70 for a half price permit. And then the yard waste standalone from $25 to $50. That $46,000 in generation is directly attributed to us trying to put more money into the reserves. So you'll see that number correlates with the line item that we want to try to help build up our reserves.
So you want to take yard waste from $25 to $50?
for a standalone permit, yes. For a standalone permit, not, the tonnage right now is $60 a ton, but if you buy a permit, yard waste permit with your trash permit, then it's gonna remain at 20. But if you come in and buy it separately, then we were asking it to go up to 50.
Yeah, we sort of got to be careful, because then we're going to be paying the county to pick it up off the back roads if we get too high. You know what I mean? And that's going to cost a whole lot more.
You'll have a mattress crew.
Yeah.
Well, we're also trying to keep up with some changing regulations. There are some proposals in the State House where they're going to force recycling of mattresses and different things, or at least present options to do such. Yeah, it may not be mandated to have to recycle a mattress, but they're pushing toward those kind of issues. So we're trying to get ahead of the game, because we know it's not going to cost. It's going to cost us something to recycle a mattress. It's and we already lose a lot of money on recycling in general. So we're at least trying to cover our bases here.
How many mattresses a year do we have brought to our landfill that are picked up along the highway?
Picked up along the highway?
You would just throw them out.
I really don't know.
Tires.
Tires.
Yeah.
That's going to go through the roof now.
I think Jim Sterling organized a crew one day down at South County, 3 dump truck loads of tires going off the side of the one road.
Yes.
But since 2011, I think you got to raise your rates. It's been since, I think you got to somewhere. I don't know how much or what on, but.
It does make sense. Again, these rates were proposed last year as well.
You had a mix, some were raised and some weren't, is that correct?
Last year, the tipping fees primarily,
A few tipping
a
fees.
few
We
tipping
raised-
fees were raised, but not, what is being proposed here was not given approval to be raised. And we would like a decision or direction from the commissioners, because we do, for any rate increases, need to move forward with a public hearing for that. And I know our legal department is anxious to get that information as well, to prepare that.
If we can start with to me, the easier ones, we don't have to make a motion to do them all at once, right?
No, you're not setting the rates. The only thing you're gonna do is authorize it to go to
I thought
public
today
hearing.
was for discussion only.
Yeah, I think.
Today is to move forward for a rate hearing.
You don't need a vote on consensus to go to public hearing, is that correct?
I think would be cleaner to have a vote simply authorizing that it goes to public hearing. That doesn't, the only thing that doesn't mean you're approving the rates. The only thing that's doing is saying, yeah, we're gonna have a public hearing. It authorizes our office to contact the Herald Mail and get the required legal notices in the paper.
Yeah, that's fine.
Can we make that motion now, or do we go to public hearing? Or aren't we done yet?
I would like to make a separate motion for each fund. So yes, I would prefer that you make
If
one.
there's any fund that you want to adjust, you do it now.
Yeah, we would prefer that. If there's something that is not sitting well with the commissioners, that warrants further discussion or something to bring back.
Again, voting for it today is only to go to public hearing, not to lock in the rate.
Well, I'd motion to go propose rate increases, to go public hearing.
I will second that, but I would also like the information for the tonnage fee, because the minimum scale fee, that I'm not in support of that.
That's fine. We can come up with that number.
And then this is the motion for solid waste fees, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
We have a first and a second to move it to public hearing, not to approve the rates. Any more discussion? Please, Wayne.
I'll be voting no on this today. I understand we need to operate the landfill as a business. The amount of fees that we would be increasing by is less than that $250,000 unauthorized loan that was conducted several months ago. And I just haven't seen any satisfactory movement on the part of the county trying to recoup that fee. That we just saw in the previous presentation how some of our general fund revenue goes towards subsidizing the landfill. That's taxpayer money that I feel we need to get back. And I think that it sets a bad precedent if we don't take action to try and recoup that. So I'll be a no.
Well, if I could interject, if I can.
It's the reality of it. I understand.
I know that, last year's board tied the loan repayment to our budget for
Which would have been in
2019.
the fund balance use.
But that's a one-time payment. So if it was repaid, it would have been in our budget for this current fiscal year, but we would still be that $250,000 short for every year after.
That's correct.
So, these proposed rate increases are to move us forward regardless of what happened or didn't happen in FY19. This is looking forward to get what we need to keep moving along. So,
But if we had that money today, if that was recouped today, that could possibly make up for our rate increases.
If that
I disagree.
in FY19, yes.
No, I disagree, because if that's $250,000, it's a one-time amount.
Exactly.
And they're showing this is a reoccurring problem. And if I could give them $1 million,
Until we get that money back, it's a recurring problem that we don't.
no.
That's only a one-time payment.
That's a one-time fee. It's the same thing if we sell a building and we net a $250,000 gain, we can't put that into an operational budget because it's a fund balance increase and that's it. And this was a fund balance decrease, where what this is talking about is reoccurring revenue. And I understand your concern. You've brought it up many times, but what we're looking here, this is reoccurring revenue that's talking about multiple years, and the 250 is a one-time fund balance. It's two separate distinct revenues. I'm blanking on the word.
It is and it isn't, in my opinion. The $250,000, as they said, the landfill continues to generate revenue and things are on the upward move. So if we didn't have to raise rates this year, there's a possibility with the revenues that are being generated at the landfill currently, if the trend keeps increasing, we wouldn't have to raise rates next year. We'd have some money to operate.
We've also had a large increase in a cost for leachate due to all the rain. So that's something to be
That's
considered
just
too,
my take on
because
Okay, we've had discussion. Again, this isn't a vote to raise rates, it's to move it to public hearing.
Okay, so when will we have the discussion of raising rates? After the public hearing?
Now's the time. Just take it to public hearing.
Yes, so we're just going to public hearing, and then I'll still have the opportunity to either support or not support all or any of the increases that's being requested.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
But
I just wanted to clarify, we checked the minutes from last year. Apparently, the minutes indicate that there was a consensus to take these rates to public hearing, not necessarily by way of motion. So if the board's more comfortable simply moving forward on a consensus basis, we can do that.
Okay.
Rather than by motion.
Got my consensus, move to public hearing.
And for discussion, if the rates aren't acceptable to the people or the commissioners, we have the opportunity to lower or not raise them at all, right? Correct?
Yes, that's
From the public
correct.
Hearing comments? Yes. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's my understanding, is because we could increase one and then leave others the same, depending on the public hearing and afterwards.
Correct, that's what happened last year. Certain ones
So when
were
will the
approved,
public
certain
hearing,
were.
has to be, we have to have the public hearing by what date?
It's in April. I believe it's April 21st. Is that a Tuesday? I believe that is
23rd.
23rd.
And notification date is 2 weeks, or
Yes.
any more discussion for consensus to move these rates forward to public hearing?
All right, so I assume the motion was withdrawn.
Consensus, yeah, motion withdrawn to consensus. Andy, you were a yes? Terry's a yes, Wayne?
I'm a no.
A no. I'm a yes to move it forward consensus for public hearing, but that doesn't mean I support any higher rates. There you go, there's your direction, thank you.
Thank you. All right. You're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
No, you stay.
Thank you, everybody. All right, here we go.
All right.
Part B.
That's right. Water quality funds. We have 4 water quality funds: the utility admin fund, water fund, sewer fund, pretreatment fund. I have prepared this spreadsheet for you, which I think is really important to see in total. This includes the water fund, the utility admin fund, and the sewer fund. And why this is important to talk about as a whole, we're going to go through each of the funds separately, but why this is important to talk about as a whole is because many of the wages and benefits are appropriated based on prior year actuals between these different funds. So as you can see on the screen, wages and benefits other than pension and health insurance only attributed to a $39,000 increase overall. That's important to understand because when we go through the funds individually, you may see an increase in one fund, but there's a decrease in another fund. So they go back and forth. So it's really important to look at these in total. Wages and benefits increase of $39,000 from FY19 budget to FY20 budget. The pension, you see an increase of $430,000. Again, that is related to that increase in pension that we spoke about earlier. Health insurance costs.
For clarification on this, is that pension was then a general fund. So in essence, that in this scenario, the $429,000, essence, the general fund was subsidizing all of these enterprise funds because it was paying the pension costs where the enterprise fund should have been paying it.
Yes.
But now it's doing it, for lack of a better word, the correct way.
Yes, now we're reallocating it, to the appropriate funds.
And that's the same thing with all of these, just the increase with the last one, the solid waste.
Yes.
That was being subsidized by the general fund, and now it's actually going to the fund. Okay.
Yes. Health insurance costs, you do see an increase there. That's based on a 7% budget increase for the costs that we're seeing today. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Debt increased overall $5,000. CIP appropriations, approximately $73,000. That's for, items such as lab equipment, vehicles, grinder pumps, heavy equipment, and water meters. Other incidental items did increase about $70,000 for a total increase over those 3 funds of $826,000. If you take out the pension and the health insurance, there's $640,000 there. So really, if you're looking at the other line for, items within the control of the fund, even some of those items include, utility increases and just general increases that we're seeing today, and not necessarily within the operating manager's control. But that 69,000 only represents 0.4% of the budget in whole. So I think that's something to be aware of as well. And the wages and benefits didn't increase very much for the 39,000 due to reorganizations and drop savings. So those savings are factored into this budget. Utility budget is on tab 13 of your books. If you would like to turn to that tab.
Ask one quick question. Earlier this year, I think it was, Dan, you were talking about we were going to start testing other people's water. You were going to use the lab for generating revenue.
Yes, sir.
Have we started that?
Yes, sir.
Is it?
I mean, we've just started the initial part of reaching out to make sure that people are aware that we're accepting new business, and we haven't seen anything that really is showing us that we've got some dollars in the bank yet, but there's obviously some general interest, and we think that that's going to be an area where we can build additional revenues in the future. There's definitely potential there.
Awesome, thank you.
Is that similar to what Fredericktown Labs would do?
Yes, sir.
Well, they got a tremendous business. We need to steal that business, I reckon.
Amen.
No.
They should contact the realtor, let them know about it.
All right, the utility budget does provide supportive services to the water and sewer operations of the Water Quality Department. Services provided include administration, lab testing, maintenance for vehicles, and utility facilities. It also renders contract services for operating and maintaining other municipal treatment plants. The FY19 budget was $4.4 million, 2020 budget was $4.9 million, difference of $555,000. Majority of that related to pension and health insurance. Remember the first slide, that was the majority of our cost increase, and we see it here in this fund. Water budget highlights. Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up 1 second. I had you turn to tab 13 because I wanted to bring something to your attention. Under the miscellaneous revenues section, it's about midway down your page. You do see a CIP transfer of $170,000 approximately, $169,920. That CIP transfer is directly related to the new Clean County initiative, so that's not actually an increase in cost. That program is actually just transferring from the CIP project over into this fund because it's most appropriately classified in this fund. So the CIP transfer is money that's coming from the capital project used for that Clean County initiative into this fund. So it is a wash. It's not actually an increase in cost for that Clean County program. I did want to make sure that that was clear. Okay, whoops, jumping ahead. Okay, water is on tab 14, and I'm primarily looking at the summary sheets as we move through this. There is detail behind those summary sheets. If you're so inclined to go through that, please be my guest. I did not want to take the time today to go through line by line changes. I think it's more appropriate to have that high level overview also of those three funds together, which is why I presented that on the first slide. So the water budget did increase by about $15,000 from FY19's budget. The rate increases that are being proposed today for water would generate approximately $24,000 in additional revenue. And you can see that on the first page after tab 14.14.1 under utility revenues, $24,300.
And again, the challenges that we face with the water fund has always been the amount of customers with less than right around 1,300 customers and about 36 miles of pipe and services that we have to provide. It really presents a challenge, and the only real way that we can make everything work is development. If we have additional customers and bring new customers in, that's what is planned, and that's what we really need to help this fund become more viable.
If you turn to the next page after tab 14, it's 14-2, and you look down at the category summary, it's the last summary box that you have there. You'll notice the operating cost, it shows increased $43,000. That is directly related to the utility admin charge, which is directly related to the utility fund. So basically, water and sewer support the utility fund. Water supports it with, it's supported 10% with water and 90% with sewer. So you'll see that utility admin charge in both the water expenses and the sewer expenses. And I just wanted to make it clear to you that that's directly related to the first fund that we spoke about. Sewer fund did increase over last year about $574,000. That is shown on tab 15. And that, again, is mainly related to the pension and health insurance cost and the utility admin charge, which is also partially pension and health care costs. So these funds do work together. So that's something to note. On page 15-1, you'll see a new revenue source under miscellaneous revenue, operating grants of $150,000, which we are getting, or which we will apply for because of efficiencies of our wastewater system, operating the plant below 3 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. So that's something that we first got for the Weinbrenner plant last year, and we look forward to getting for both Weinbrenner and Conococheague. And the rate increases that are being proposed in just a minute would generate approximately $400,000 in additional revenue to the fund.
Where do you see those at, the increases?
They're coming. They're a couple pages back. So we will definitely get to them. Okay? The pretreatment operation was privatized in 2006. This was accomplished through a long-term lease process and was supported by the Washington County Board of County Commissioners. This fund decreased about $7,000. And primarily the revenues included in this fund are lease payments that we receive about $350,000 per year. And we also pay debt from this fund of about $870,000 per year. And it is balanced through fund balance. And this current lease goes until 2026.
Well, it's a 99-year lease, but they have an option in 26.
Option in 26.
Correct.
Sorry, thank you.
Who's that lease with?
I'm sorry?
Who's that
with?
lease with?
That lease is now with Valacor. That was with Spirit Services before, and Spirit Services sold their operation to Valacor. It's a corporation out of, I believe, the main office is in Cincinnati.
When did that happen?
In 2006.
No,
Oh, those.
the change over to
just recently.
Valacor, that changed,
2018?
I think it was about 7 or 8 months ago. And so far, we've gotten tremendous, tremendous cooperation. We've gotten some, actually, the septic pumping program that we are offering rebates to individuals to get their septic tanks pumped, which helps us with our MS4 permit and gets us credits. Also, helps people, I think it's 75, we're going to offer a rebate of $75 per tank, and they're subsidizing that as a goodwill gesture, so to speak, when they came into the county.
People out in the county could have their septic pumped and receive $75 of their cost back.
Yes, sir. And we get credit. We get credit towards our, and it's a significant amount of credit for our MS4 permit. So it's a win-win for everybody. The haulers are going to get additional business. Hopefully Valacor will end up getting more business, and the citizens of Washington County will get a rebate as a promotion to get their septic tanks pumped. So, and again, and we get, I believe it's 0.35, don't quote me exactly, acres per septic tank, so that it's a significant amount of acreage that we will get credit for, that it's an easy way of getting a lot of credit. Those credits are very expensive if we have to go about other means to accomplish, and they are required in our permit. So it's a huge help to us. It's a huge help to the business of the haulers. It's a good help to the citizens of Washington County to promote get their septic tanks pumped.
So how would the homeowners find out about this rebate? I've never heard of it.
Well, we haven't started even advertising it yet, sir. It goes into effect July 1st, and we have got an entire advertising program set up and a promotional program through our department and through Valacor, and you'll hear an awful lot more about it in the recent days.
What are we doing to help manage costs that we can control out at Water Quality? There has been a recent reorganization that was brought before you, and that would be effective in eliminating vacant positions. There has been some inventory control. Here on this slide, you have the inventory stockroom was cleaned out, and items were sold on Gov Deals, which generated $40,000. So this is something that I can let you talk to Dave.
$40,000 so far, and we right now have some heavy equipment, some older heavy equipment that is beyond repair. It's advertised on Gov Deals, and we expect that we probably are going to maybe increase that by at least 50%. So the things that were in our stockroom and that were pretty much taking up space, we've been able to generate, I'm hoping for about $60,000 that we can then turn back in, buy newer equipment, buy better equipment so that we can provide better services without having to use our rate fee or our ratepayers' fees to do it with. And I think you can see our guys did an absolutely fantastic job. You couldn't walk through that building prior to them cleaning it out, and I think they've got it cleaned out. We've instituted a inventory program that sets limits on each individual item, that makes sure that all of our people that are out in the field know exactly what we have and what quantities that we have in the inventory building. So instead of running out to Lowe's every time to pick up a piece of pipe or something that they may need, they'll know exactly that we have it in our inventory, where then we can take advantage of bulk purchasing, where we can buy things wholesale and provide that instead of having to run out and buy retail.
Right. So it is saving money all around. It is a good efficiency that has been implemented that probably no one has said much about.
These are the small things that we've been doing lately that seems like a small thing when you're talking about a $15 million budget, but for every little dollar counts, and every efficiency that we can build into our system helps in the long run. And all those little efficiencies add up to a large amount of money. And we hope that that's going to put us on the right track to help address some of these issues that we're going to talk about soon here.
Yeah. I'm going to let Dan talk about some of the other things related to reclassifying properties and the other bullet.
Well, I mean, I think you all remember that the reorganization that we went through and that you all were kind enough to approve, that will not actually go into effect until probably, we'll get the full effect of that in January when we have a lot of people that are going to be retiring. Right now, we're seeing some of it, but you'll see the most of it in the half of this year and full effect of it next year. 2021. And as people retire, we eliminated at least 3 major supervisory positions. And every single position, every single opening that we have, we reevaluate whether we can reorganize, whether we can restructure, or can we consolidate and see how efficiently we can do that. So that reorganization is going to, I forget exactly what the number was because we had 2 or 3 numbers, but it was in the neighborhood of $200,000 that we saw that we would be pretty confident in saying that that was the savings that was going to produce. The inventory control I just talked about a little bit, and again, the biggest thing about the inventory control is this mindset with our individuals and our people that are out in the field, knowing that we can come back and we can know exactly what we have in stock, take advantage of it, of the any kind of wholesale prices that we can get, and keep control of the dollar amount that we have sitting on a shelf. Reclassification of properties, I think it was brought up a little bit this morning. There are about, I want to say 35 maybe accounts that have been classified as residential that should be commercial. For example, anything that's an apartment building would be considered a commercial account, but we somehow have got it classified as a residential. When we look at the overall picture, and I don't have an exact dollar amount of what that is going to result for us, because there are certain ways that you calculate the bay restoration fee, different from a residential and a commercial. And we had originally done everything, and we had found that when we were looking at, okay, if we take these residential accounts and move them over to commercial, we were still calculating the bay restoration fee the old way. And it made a big difference. It made a huge difference, as a matter of fact. I think probably 20% on each individual account. So before we made an actual doubt and told you exactly how much that was going to be, some accounts are going to go up, some accounts are going to stay the same, some accounts are going to be less. Some of the accounts that are going to increase, they're going to see an initial increase because they're going to go from a residential way of billing to a commercial way of billing, which is based mainly on the usage. They'll see an initial increase in their cost, but long term they'll see a much lower cost, because as looking at it as a commercial account, they won't have to pay individual connection fees. For example, a mobile home park. Right now, as a residential fee, each time they put another residence in or another mobile home in, they pay us a connection fee. If we go to the commercial way, they wouldn't have to do that. So I think in the big picture, when you look at everything, most likely it's going to increase our revenues initially a little bit, and then long term it'll balance out, and I think it'll be a benefit for both the customer and our department. Identifying and correcting some issues. Grinder pumps. Grinder pumps has always been, we maintain approximately 3,000 grinder pumps. And when I mean maintain, that means if they go bad, we replace them. If they are anything that's wrong with them, that we run out and take care of them. We did 600 grinder pump calls last year. And I believe, as Mr. Weaver mentioned this morning, when those grinder pumps, and a lot of those grinder pumps were put in, those people were promised that those services would continue and that we would always do that. What we are proposing to do here would not affect any existing grinder pump or the service that we provide any existing grinder pump. So those people will know that those commitments that were made back there will still be valid. What we're proposing to do is any new installation, that those new installations be then the responsibility of the homeowner to do, which is more in line with other jurisdictions. It's more in line with what the city of Hagerstown does and other jurisdictions. When those grinder pumps are put in, those are the responsibility of the homeowner once they're installed.
So you're saying that's for a new home, a new build?
New installation, yes, sir, only.
What if an old grinder pump goes old, you have to replace? Is that considered new?
No, sir. That would be considered an existing account that we would continue to maintain as we always have.
Okay, because it says new installation, so that's any new or?
That would be a totally new grinder pump, the whole system, like a new house.
Right.
Not replacing a new pump with, an old pump with a new pump.
Right. That's what I meant by that.
Replacing the old pump with a new pump is part of our responsibility and our commitment to those people that we will maintain.
And if that property's sold,
Doesn't affect it. It stays the same.
Even if they replace the grinder pump?
Even if they replace the grinder pump.
But then they would be limited to a certain number of calls.
What we're looking at, and again, this is something that we have yet to run the initial evaluation to find out. Do we have accounts that are multiple and over a certain amount of calls every year? And we would probably look at those and say, okay, maybe those need to be addressed differently. First of all, we need to look and see if we're going out there more than 5 or 6 times a year. Is there a reason for it? Is there a reason? Is there a mechanical reason? Is there something we can do to change it to make sure that those people don't have to endure 5 or 6 calls? Or is it their responsibility? Is it something that the homeowner's doing? If it's something that the homeowner's doing, then I think we need to look at maybe we should be telling them, you know, we're more than willing to help you here, but, you know, you have to do your part too. And that if you get over a certain amount of calls, then we may have to start charging.
Was that a written agreement way back somewhere when you installed these grinder pumps? Was that a written agreement with the homeowner? Or is that just like shake a hand and we just
Well, a lot of it, some of it had to do with, in certain communities, sometimes there was some state money that was involved, that if they were to transfer and transition from a well and septic over to sewer system, and the most efficient way of doing it was a grinder pump, then we went ahead and did that transition. And part of the promise to those people, like for Sandy Hook, for example, all those, there's 64 grinder pumps down in Sandy Hook that we maintain, that we installed and we maintain. And those were put in as part of a project that was funded by.
Who put those in, the county?
Yes, sir.
So who would put that in on Sandy Hook tomorrow if it was I built a new house and you needed a grinder pump? Who would install that? The home builder or
Well,
you?
We have standards, and we would allow a plumber to put it in if he'd put it into our standards.
But if you did it, I guess what I'm getting at is if you did it, you don't have a written agreement with the old people, yet you're going to install another one. You might have to just, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Kirk, but for legalities, you've already set a standard, a precedence with the old ones. If you're sticking a new one in my house, the county, how could he refuse to service it then? Or he would service it, but he would charge me to service it, maybe.
I'm sorry, if we were to put it in?
Yeah, if you were to put it in.
No charge.
If we were to put it into our standards and turn it over to the homeowner, I think at that
And there
point
would be a fee
it
for
would be part of
service.
an agreement. We charge now for installing the grinder pump. We don't charge for our installation or our excavation or anything. We charge for whatever the grinder pump and the tank cost us.
Yeah, but to come back and fix it, you'd charge a fee then.
Well, if it was under in the new policy, if we were in a new home,
But
if
there
we
is
were to
no
come
policy.
back, we wouldn't. It would be.
I'm just nitpicking here.
I know.
because
Yes, sir. I know. But I
just
mean, it's-
because if you're doing John 63, and I build a new house and you stick a grinder pump in for me, then you're gonna come back and charge me to fix it, but you're not charging the other 63 people. I'm just trying to keep us out of another room full of people, and that's enough said about it because it's small potatoes compared to what we got facing us. So.
And remember, these are things that we're thinking about doing. These are things that we're looking at everything and anything and
I got you.
everything.
I just save a nickel here. I understand.
Yes, sir.
So this is.
Yes, sir.
I was
And,
just,
and the conversation is a good one, and those questions are things that we need to work through. Absolutely correct.
Yep, these are definitely ideas for things that could possibly be addressed. We can move on. We did talk about the operating grants that we got, so that's very exciting, and that we will look to get in the future. Oh. Here listed are just some costs, of the water quality funds. Utility costs around $990,000. Chemicals and treatment another $830,000. Debt service around $5 million. Wages and benefits around $7 million, and capital project needs around $200,000.
And I think those utility costs and chemical costs are directly related to I&I. Our total flows for 2018 system-wide were over 30% higher than the year before. The two particular plants of interest, Weinbrenner, which is up at Cascade, and the Smithsburg plant, Weinbrenner was 47% higher than the year before, directly related to the I&I issue.
So now, Terry, here we go with the rates for what you've been asking. As you all know,
You said you were going to get to them.
I'm getting there, yes.
tight, Terry.
Yep. So what is the rate model? You guys have heard a lot about that lately. It's definitely been a topic of discussion. I think first and foremost, I'd like to reiterate that it is a budgeting tool. It's a tool that's used to help us estimate future revenues and expenditures. It does generate a cash flow output for future years, and it helps to identify the cost of providing the service. It is what you put in it. So if we estimate that we're going to have 2.5% wage increases, that goes in it. If we say 2% operating cost increases, there we go. If we say we expect to have revenue from the new capacity management project, that is included. There are assumptions that are made that go into this rate model. So how can we feel comfortable using it, and how can we feel comfortable that it's accurate? I will say that it does generate the cash flow output. We can look at that document. We can say, hey, this does look accurate for 2020, and it does look accurate for 2021. It takes into considerations the revenues that we're receiving today, what we expect to receive in the future if there's a potential rate increase, what we receive annually for miscellaneous revenues. We have in there our debt service schedules for the current debt service that we have and future debt service that is included in our capital plan. So we have a lot of different input into this model. And when we evaluate the output, the cash flow output, we can determine if it looks reasonable or not. So I think that it all comes down to, is this logical? Does this make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, we can look at that output and try to figure out why it doesn't make sense. So what we have today for you are proposals for some rate increases. The water rate increases we'll discuss first. As you can see in your paperwork or on the screen, the base rate for water, we're proposing a very minimal increase for residential customers, 0.7%. This is largely the result of us trying to align our cost with the cost of service model projections. You will notice, though, on the flip side, the volume charge is much higher. So this is something to consider, something for discussion. 40% of our customers are a base charge only, so with a lower base charge, 40% wouldn't really be affected. 80% of our customers use under 12,000 gallons, so for the volume charge being higher, it may not affect the full population. That's what I'm getting at. We've heard Dan talk about customer density being an issue with the water, fund. And so here, the rates in front of you for discussion, residential for full service, increase of 0.7% or 74 cents. Commercial 1 for full service, the same, 0.74 cents. Commercial 2, you'll see a larger increase for the base rate. This is because this is what the cost of service model is projecting. It is in line with, I went back and I looked at some prior year models to see, was that cost always higher? It was, we've never gotten there. The population that this affects is approximately 18 accounts. So I think that's really something to consider, especially if there was uncomfortability with it, because it's only 18 accounts.
And I think it's important that what we tried to do here is that we tried to minimize the impact on the people that are using the minimum amount. And a lot of times those people are the people that are on fixed incomes. Right. So by doing that and by raising the usage, the higher end usage, raising their rates a little bit higher, what we've tried to do here is that we've shifted the bulk of the 6.7% increase to those accounts that have the higher usage. Right. So basically you can tell somebody that you have a little bit of control over your bill. If you use less water, your bill will go down. Where if we had to raise the base rate, people don't have any control over that.
Quick question here. We're saying at 80% of, is it all users use under 12,000 gallons?
Yes, of all water customers
All
only.
water customers.
So that's residential, commercial, commercial 2, and volunteer. That's everybody. That's 80% use less than 12,000. Can we get a breakdown, or do we know of the residential, how many are using more than this 6,000? Because of looking at this, I'm assuming residential by numbers is the largest amount of payers.
Accounts, yes, 1,267
And
accounts.
That's by percentage-wise is the highest percentage-wise increase. But of this, how many people is that going to be affecting that are above that 6,000? Because I know we said 40% are using less than 6,000. Of that 40%, again, is it residential, commercial? Where are
we can provide.
I think your other 40% comes in between 6,000 and 12,000. Another 40% of users, and then the other 20% is above 12,000.
Correct. And we can provide a spreadsheet if you want that shows exactly how many accounts are at each level.
Yeah, if I get, because I'm trying to figure out how many residential customers, how many commercial customers is this your proposed rate? How many would that be affecting?
Sure.
Out of curiosity, how many non-metered accounts do we have? Rough number. A dozen, 100?
To the top of my head.
I don't have it.
I'll have to get that for you.
Fine.
But we can get that. I don't believe that's a very large number. You know? Nope, okay. We'll have to get that to you, sir.
Yeah,
If you have a non-metered account, how do you charge? The
Flat
non-
rate. It's a flat rate.
inside your water bill, you're not really always just paying for the amount of water. There's a lot of that extra money used to be part of the stakeholder of the system for major repairs and upgrades. Is that not correct?
Well, we
I
would
know
like to
people
think so,
come and say,
yes.
all I do is use the washing machine. Why am I getting this big bill? And the explanation would be that they're part of the system, part of the stakeholders, so repairs and mandated improvements. Would that be accurate, or is there
That
more
would
to
be
add to
very
that?
accurate, yes, sir.
Again, we've tried to take what the model is showing as a cost of service. We've put it on the paper here. It does go along with keeping that minimal base charge more level, not increasing very much, and does push the volume charge to be higher for an overall total bill increase of approximately 6.7% per quarter.
That's what you're saying the proposed rate increase is.
Yes.
I think that 6.7 translated to about $42,000 total in the whole big picture of things.
Commissioners, I guess we need a consensus to move this.
If there's any discussion that should be had on any individual proposal here, we can talk about that, or
Consensus means we're not supporting a rate increase, we're just moving it forward to public hearing, is that correct? If you have a chance, we could alter it today or move it. It does not mean you support it.
Public hearing anyway.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
supporting the public hearing only. And then we can discuss the rates after the public hearing.
I'm good with that.
Okay, consensus
I'm
to
good with
move it
that,
to,
as long as, again, just getting the breakdowns of these customers, because I know that what the 6.7% is what's being proposed, but the over 1,000 is 15.7%. So I want to see the breakdown.
all right, a consensus was offered. I have, I think, two, Randy and Harry, consensus to move forward to public hearing. Okay, 5, consensus. And a reminder, we are in Clear Spring at 6 o'clock.
yes, sir. So, here in front of you, I thought I would provide some snippets of the model for you to see what our annual surplus or deficiency would be if certain revenue increases were enacted. So if we look at this, there's 3 different scenarios. The first one is the 5%, which is what led us to the rates that, even though these are 6.7%, it's based on how the increases are designed within the rate structure. That's why it's not a 1-to-1 with the 5%. It can be. Sometimes it does fluctuate. So keep that in mind. This is a high level. Here's what you're kind of looking at for your annual surplus or deficiency, depending on the rate increases that you institute. So the first line is a 5% across the 10 years. Okay, and what this shows you is that in 2020, your annual deficiency is $430,000. In 2029, you have a surplus of $21,000. So if you did a 5% increase for revenue for the water rates over 10 years, that's what your annual surplus or deficiency would look like. Hypothetically, keeping all things constant today. Keep in mind this is a projection.
just refresh my memory. When's the last water rate hike? When did we do the last one?
Last year,
And before that?
the year before that.
And you're proposing now we wouldn't have to do it every year.
No, I'm not. I am saying that over the next 10 years, here's a couple different scenarios, and if we would increase rates 5% per year on average, that's where at year 10 we would be in a positive position.
So that's what you said.
That's what I said. For comparison purposes, the second middle line shows you a 4% increase, so you can see a 1% differential each year. Still in year 2029 gets you that negative $121,000 as an annual deficiency. And then just for comparison purposes, I showed what it would take to be in a positive position next year. And that's with the 25%, which I'm not here proposing. I'm just showing it on the screen.
So what's the last several boards increase?
About 3.5% to 4% on average.
3.5% to 4% on average?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I think this is what the value of the model is. And the model, again, is, as Sarah said, is a tool. Her staff takes just a mound of information in all of our budgets, all of our debt service, everything that goes into operating that department, and plugs it all into this program. And then it allows us to play with it. It allows us to go, okay, play what if scenarios back and forth to see what happens. And that's the result.
So the first thing that we do after we plug those numbers in is we check that cash flow statement. We try to check to make sure it looks accurate. It's something that's reasonable, something we can rely on, and then we go and we look at the rates here. So that's what's in front of you today, different scenarios for you, just to understand how things will be moving forward and what that looks like for the water fund. It's important that we're all under the same understanding. Okay. Sewer rate increases. In line with the model, we increased these rates by 5% across the board. That did get us moving towards our cost of service model projections and was a nice even number. So that would be an overall 5% increase per quarter, or $8.24. Would you like me to go through them one by one?
No, just what was the past boards, what did they approve on sewer rates? Obviously, it's
Very
been every
similar,
year.
about 3.5% to 4% per year, yeah.
That's been as long as you all can remember.
Yeah, I mean, I have the documentation upstairs. I could get it for you, but it is about 3.5% to 4%.
So now, on this long-term projection, what were you projecting the increase to be to get to this, projected profit? I won't say profit, but fund self-sustaining at 2023.
Are you talking about
this sheet here?
Okay, that's using the top 5% on the screen here to get to my long-term projection. That's 555 and then 3 thereafter. That coincides with the long-term projection.
Sarah, on both the water and the sewer increase suggestions, option 3, both show a large 20% and a 25% increase as an option this year with smaller projection. What was the methodology? What was your thinking in offering that as a suggestion?
Just really because we've spoken about how these funds should be self-supporting, and so it was kind of just an option to show what would it take for these funds to be self-supporting and the impact that it would have on our users.
So it's not necessarily an option that you would recommend?
It's not one that I'm proposing today, no.
Okay.
With that, you can see the first option here on the screen with the 5% in 2021 and 22 and then 3% thereafter. The idea with this option is that if you look in 2029, you will see that we're in a positive annual surplus of $2.1 million. So that's there. And then the second option, 3.5% for the next 10 years, you can see how that changes. And again, these are presented just for your information as a comparison tool.
And to show you how a little bit of a difference makes, a
Yeah,
little
how-
bit of percentage makes a big difference in
Yeah.
the numbers.
Yep, definitely.
On the sewer fund, we still need to, I guess, talk about the debt, the deficiency of 2020, 21, 22, and how that's going to be.
We do need to talk about that.
Because, I did rough numbers, but if, I'm in favor of a loan over a general surplus, because I don't want this to be spread out to all the taxpayers that are not users of this fund, since it's supposed to be, again, a self-supporting fund. How does that loan have to work? Can we just say, hey, the first year we're going to loan you the $2.7 million, and it's paid out with 0% interest over 20 years, so that it's just making the base pay, and the following year we do the exact same thing until we get to a surplus, and then it's starting to pay back?
Yeah, we can structure it any way we like. Yeah,
then
we have flexibility with that.
So then we're able to start to pay back. And slowly, and then by doing it that way, we're also at the same time of paying back the general fund, we're doing the same thing of slowly being able to increase that reserve to get to the amount that you needed, the 2.5 million, if I remember correctly.
What's the negative? Give me a negative for that, thought process.
A negative for doing the loan?
Yeah.
It just extends the period at which the sewer fund is self-managed or self-supporting. I mean,
It adds another payback that the fund has to pay now the county back also.
Right.
Yeah, so, but.
And I would like to, after we get to that $2.5 million fund balance, we could say that anything that's above that goes to pay the principal down, so it's not out 20 years. Could get paid off sooner.
Yeah, I think something important to note, though, is that, staff is doing everything they can to reduce positions where they are able to reduce operating costs, to find efficiencies, and still we face these increases. These increases are based on MDE regulations. We see it every few months, something new is coming out, or, we've seen it certainly over the past 5 years, and it has taken a toll, and it has created these situations that we're in.
And I think that's important to really stress, and the fact that our staff has been absolutely superb, and they're doing everything they can. They understand the situation. They know that it's a belt tightening environment that we're in, and that we have to look at everything. And they really do a great job. I can't say that enough. I mean, our guys over this last rain, we had 3 inches of rain on Thursday, and we had 3 plants that had guys that worked all night to make sure that we didn't have any issues that would have cost us more. So these guys are dedicated, guys and girls are dedicated, and they are doing a magnificent job. And we just have a big job ahead of us to dig out and to make sure that we put this fund and the department and division back on a proper track. And we're doing it, but it's a slow process.
I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention the $161,000 related to the Williamsport forgiveness, that will be paid for through property. We sold a property, Conicajig Elementary, in January of 2018 for $500,000. So those funds did hit our bottom line for 2018. We'll be able to take those funds and satisfy the $161,000 if there is support from the commissioners for that, so that none of that is a factor of the rate increase.
Will that be a budget transfer, or how's the procedure on that?
It'd be a journal entry.
And then would that be a vote by the commissioners as a line item on our agenda, or how would that come up during staff?
Be a vote, I believe.
You could vote today if.
Vote or consensus?
I'd like to wait on that and bring it back in as a budget transfer and have a formal.
Okay. Formal. Okay, agenda item. Okay.
Pardon me? Okay. Just been reminded before you be a consensus on moving forward with the sewer rate increase. Again, it's to move it forward to public hearing, not to support the rate. there consensus to move forward to public hearing?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is this accurate that you would that I would, for now until at least 2029, there's going to be a 3 to 5% increase water and sewer? Is that accurate to say that every year?
With the numbers that I see, yes.
Well, it's been like that for the 8 years I've been here.
Regulation continues to increase. Operating
12
costs
years for
continues
Mr.
to
Baker,
increase.
every year.
Utilities continue to increase.
Gotcha.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You're on board.
I'll wrap this up real quick for you, Commissioner Klein. I know you're looking at the time.
Another hour and 20 minutes. More.
Okay. The airport fund is the next fund. FY19 budget was 1.987. FY 2020 budget is $2 million, a difference of $11,000, only a 0.57% increase over last year. Majority of changes within the budget include the wages and benefits section. That's due to personnel changes. And then operating costs did increase approximately $64,000 over last year. $29,000 is related to building up of reserves. We talked about that a little bit in solid waste. That's happening here in the airport fund as well. There's also an addition for a lease, $28,690 per year for 5 years for a John Deere utility tractor. The airport fund in your budget book is included in tab 19. And so there is additional information in that tab for you. We'll continue to run through this. The good news with the airport fund is up until 2020, or most recently, we've been providing an appropriation from the general fund of approximately $15,000 per year. The airport fund was able to balance the fund with no appropriation from the general fund for FY 2020. So that's exciting.
Harrison is golden.
There we go. There's some good news.
Harrison is golden.
Now you know why this is last. So overall, not a large increase for the airport fund. A couple of changes. We do have the lease that they're requesting for the John Deere tractor. They will be using no general fund appropriation, and there are some very exciting things happening with the airport, especially related to the summer schedule for Allegiant, 2 to 6 flights per week to the locations Orlando, Sanford, St. Pete, and Myrtle Beach. Also, in addition to that, the terminal hold room expansion project is expected to be bid out soon, which will expand that hold room from 150 to 350 passengers. So some good things going on at the airport. The rate increases in front of you today are related to T-hanger increases and in accordance with current lease agreements.
I was just booing that one because I got a T-hanger.
Oh. So we would like your consensus today to move these rate increases forward to public hearing as proposed in the sheet in front of you.
Commissioners had a request, consensus.
And it looks like all these increases are due to basically increase the cost.
Sorry, say that again.
All the increases here are basically due to the increase of costs that incurred.
So they're not due to increase the cost. They're mainly due to get us up to fair market value. We currently have a wait list on our T-hanger tenant list, and that's mainly due to the low prices that we offer. And so we're just trying to get us back up to fair market value. And that way we're compliant with FAA regulations on that.
Any more questions? Consensus to move this one forward? Again, not to support, but to forward the public hearing. Consensus?
Yeah, move forward.
1, 2, 3. Looks like you got 5.
Thank you.